Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Beharef ayin is an ancient phrase that goes all the way back to the time of the Bible. It means in the blink of an eye. The rabbis use it to describe how quickly things can change. In an instant, everything can be different. Beharef ayin, in the blink of an eye. While many of us may not have known that Hebrew term when we came to services today, everybody understands the depth of its meaning. After this past week, all of us have a deeper appreciation of just how quickly the world can change in the blink of an eye. When I woke up last Shabbat morning, the biggest problem on my mind was how late services were going to get out that morning, or how we were going to manage Simchas Torah with the Chicago Marathon. But then the news came of what was happening in Israel. Thousands of rockets were being fired. Ashkelon, Jerusalem, and even Tel Aviv were under attack by Hamas. And then we began to hear of the inhuman terrorist attacks, the stories being reported on kibbutzim under siege, of people hiding in their safe rooms as the terrorists searched for them. Searing images of death, destruction, and unbelievable acts of brutality. Elderly Holocaust survivors being taken in wheelchairs as hostages. In addition, there were reports of remarkable acts of bravery in attempts to save friends and family. In the end, 1,300 Israelis were murdered. More than 150 were taken hostage, and thousands were injured. On this, the Shabbat following, the IDF is poised to invade Gaza as it fights to destroy Hamas. And the world holds its breath. In what feels like the blink of an eye, beharef ayin, the world has changed. Amidst the horror of the pogrom that was visited upon the people of Israel, amidst the shock of just how unprepared Israel was for this, amidst the sense of unreality of the present moment, countries around the world have responded. One of the most stirring images of the week for me was a picture of the Brandenburg Gate in Berlin, lit up in blue and white, with the flag of Israel shining on it as a statement of German solidarity with Israel. The Brandenburg Gate has a long history in Germany and served as the backdrop of some of the huge rallies of Hitler and the Third Reich. So to see it transformed as a place to stand with Israel brought a tear to my eye. And then there were the words of President Biden, who made perhaps the most Zionistic speech by any president in history. I quote him, "This attack has brought to the surface painful memories and the scars left by a millennia of anti-Semitism and genocide of the Jewish people. So in this moment, we must be crystal clear. We stand with Israel. We stand with Israel, and we will make sure Israel has what it needs to take care of its citizens, to defend itself and respond to this attack. There is no justification for terrorism. There is no excuse. Hamas does not stand for the Palestinian people's right to dignity and self-determination. Its stated purpose is the annihilation of the state of Israel and the murder of the Jewish people. This from an American president. We had thousands of people here and online on Thursday night as we gathered as a community to pray, sing, and stand in solidarity with Israel. Yet, beharif ayin, in the blink of an eye, another story was being told. While the blood was fresh in the houses of those massacred, even before the bodies were buried, there were marches held by the thousands in London, in Paris, in Sydney, Australia, against Israel and in support of the Palestinians, but really, with the timing, in support of Hamas. Israel was portrayed as an evil, apartheid, rogue state. Rallies that can only be interpreted as standing in solidarity with Hamas, whose very purpose, as the president mentioned, it is in their covenant, is to destroy Israel. In Sydney, a thousand people stood outside the Opera House and chanted, "Gas the Jews." We saw the chief rabbi of England, Sir Ephraim Mervis, demand that a BBC reporters use the word terrorist in terms of Hamas. I quote, "I notice that the BBC has a reluctance to use the term terrorist. If one doesn't use the term terrorist, it is as if one is providing a window of opportunity for justification, and nothing can justify this." And colleges and campuses have erupted. Jewish students on campuses around the country who support Israel are castigated, harassed, and threatened. At Stanford, a professor teaching a class on colonialism used Israel as an example. He asked the students how many Jews were murdered in the Holocaust. When a student replied 6 million, the professor responded, "More than 6 million have been killed by colonizers." And then he said, "Israel is a colonizer." And then he had the Jewish students in the class identify themselves and stand in the back, saying, "This is what Israel does to Palestinians." The professor has been suspended. This at Stanford University. And closer to home, a resolution was passed in our city council yesterday in support of Israel, put forth by our only Jewish alderman, Deborah Silverstein. The resolution ends with these words: "Be it resolved that we, the members of the City Council of the City of Chicago, condemn this heinous terrorist attack by Hamas, stand in support of Israel's right to defend itself, express our deepest sorrow for the innocent Israelis murdered, and pray for the safe release of all the hostages taken into Gaza." As I think most of us are aware, there were a number of protesters there, wrapped in Palestinian flags, who were so raucous, their shouts were so inflammatory, against even condemning a terror attack against Israelis, that the mayor had to stop the session, have them escorted from the chamber so that the proceedings could continue. What is the source of this animus, this abject hatred that we're seeing erupting here in Chicago and around the world? This did not come b'cheref. This did not come in the blink of an eye. This morning we began reading the book of Genesis, which opens with the creation story. Traditionally, Jews study the Torah with commentaries, and the most popular commentator is someone by the name of Rabbi Shlomo ben Yitzchaki, Rashi. And so people regularly study Chumash and Rashi. They go together. Rashi's opening comment is based on a question. He says, the Torah is a book of law. So why doesn't the Torah begin in the book of Exodus with the first laws? Why do we need to hear the story of the creation? Why do we have to hear the stories about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and Joseph, and why? We should just start with the laws, he said. And then he quotes a more ancient text. Listen carefully. For should the peoples of the world say to Israel, you are robbers, because you took by force the lands of Canaan, Israel may reply to them, all the earth belongs to the Holy One, blessed be He. He created it and He gave it to whom He pleased, whom He willed. God gave it to them, and when God willed it, God took it from them and gave it to us. Rashi's answer is stunning. The reason that the Torah begins with the creation is to legitimize the right of the Jewish people to live in the land of Israel. Because there will come a day when people will come forward and claim that we, the Jewish people, stole that land, that we are robbers. In Rashi's day, the Crusades were getting ready to begin. And churches around him were erupting with sermons about the Christian relationship with the city of Jerusalem. And as Jews heard these sermons, they realized that they were being disenfranchised, that they were being separated from their own history. So Rashi offered an answer. This is our land. Let no one tell you otherwise. It was given to us by the Creator of all. 800 years later, in 1937, when Ben-Gurion, who would become our first Prime Minister of Israel, was summoned to give testimony to the Peel Commission, the British Commission, trying to decide how to handle the tension between Arabs and Jews. He too was asked a question about the legitimate rights of Jews to live on that land. At one point, Lord Peel asked Ben-Gurion where he was born. Ben-Gurion replied, Plonsk, Poland. A large period of silence came after that reply. Finally, Lord Peel said in the barest whisper, very strange indeed. All the Arab leaders who have appeared before me were born in Palestine. Most of the Jewish leaders who have appeared before me were born in Eastern Europe. Lord Peel then spoke up louder, saying to Ben-Gurion, the Arab people have a kushan, entitling them to this land. A kushan was an Ottoman land lease. At that point, Ben-Gurion became aware of the Bible that was used to swear him in at that meeting. And he held it up in his hand. And he said, "Here is your Kushan. Here is your deed. It is the world's most highly respected book, and I believe that you British regard it with much respect too. We must have this land." Nearly 90 years later, after a pogrom, which more Jewish lives were lost in one day than any time since the Holocaust, groups are questioning our people's right to live on that land. They are delegitimizing the Jewish people's connection to the land of Israel. So I ask you, what other country in the world has to ask permission to defend its own people? Did the United States, did anyone in the world question the United States' right to respond after 9/11? What country on earth, after 75 years, needs to be legitimized? There are too many in this world that believe that Israel is a colonial power. They believe it's a rogue state. They believe it's an apartheid state that, by definition, then must be destroyed. That's what we're talking about today. It may feel like the world has changed beharif ayin in the blink of an eye, but the challenge that we live with today, that we are facing, has a much longer history. Rashi's words have a resonance today that I wish they did not. Today, you and I, we stand in the place of Ben-Gurion. We stand in solidarity with Israel. And if we truly mean it, we have to be willing to do and say what Rashi and later Ben-Gurion were willing to say. This is our Kushan. This is our deed. We have an ancient history on that land, and we have the artifacts to prove it. There has never been a time when Jews were not living in Israel since the time of Joshua. There was never a time when Jews were not praying to come home after they were exiled. Our right to live on that land is promised to Abraham and Sarah, and it is beyond question. Moreover, the world voted in 1947 to recognize Israel as a sovereign nation. The land that Hamas attacked these Israelis on is not disputed territory. It has nothing to do with the borders of 1967. It has to do with the borders of 1948. It is on the original borders that the world plotted for the land of Israel. Hamas made it clear last Shabbat that the Jewish people does not belong there. And there are too many people around the world that agree. So to stand with Israel today is to attest to the right of the Jewish people to live on the land promised to Abraham's descendants, conquered by Joshua and David, the land on which our people built the most remarkable civilization, the land that we never stop dreaming of, the land that we return to in the modern age and built a country that is the envy of many around the world. It is our right to live on that land. It is our responsibility to do everything that we can to live with other people on that land in peace and security as well, but we must defend ourselves. Despite what you hear from Hamas, from its supporters around the world. The connection of the Jewish people to that land is as old as the Bible, and the legitimacy of Medinat Yisrael is beyond question. May those who perpetrated these crimes against humanity be brought to justice. May there be peace in that land yet for all of its inhabitants. If not beharif ayin, if not in the blink of an eye, then soon. Am Yisrael Chai.